A major injury in Dallas could put a huge damper on the Cowboys' 2022 season. I'm Joe Dolan, and this is the Fantasy Points Daily Lineup for Thursday, August 25th, 2022.
It's time for the FantasyPoints.com Daily Lineup. Staying on top of the latest news and updates around the NFL. Rise and shine, folks. We're taking the field. Here's your host, FantasyPoints.com's Joe Dolan.
Starting at quarterback today, behind the weakest offensive line of his career, is the Cowboys' Dak Prescott. Now, this isn't so much an update on Prescott, but the team around him. The Cowboys suffered a major loss during Wednesday's practice when star left tackle Tyron Smith went down with a non-contact injury. According to Todd Archer of ESPN, it is a severe injury to his left hamstring, and it is expected to, quote, cost him multiple months of the 2022 season. And per NFL Network's Ian Rappaport, literally seconds ago on Twitter, quote, Smith actually suffered an avulsion fracture of the knee, meaning the hamstring tendon that sits at the back of the knee pulled off the bone, and he needs surgery, sources say. If he's back at all, it'll be December. Ow. Injuries now are not new for Smith, who has played just 13 games in the last two seasons combined, and he hasn't played a full slate since 2015. But what is new is the Cowboys' overall lack of depth up front. Cap issues this offseason forced Dallas to flat out release star right tackle La'el Collins, which was a domino that forced talented swing tackle Terrence Steele into the starting lineup at right tackle. Now, Dallas did use its first round pick in April on the presumed left tackle of the future, Tulsa's Tyler Smith, not Tyron, Tyler, who was expected to start his career at left guard and then kick out wide when Tyron retires. Now, you could presume that maybe he kicks out to left tackle, which is his natural position, to make up for the loss of Tyron Smith. But here is what our Greg Cosell had to say about the rookie Smith in our Fantasy Points Prospect Guide. Cosell writes, overall, Smith is a tantalizing left tackle prospect with an outstanding size, length, strength, movement, competitiveness profile, and a high ceiling, who nonetheless needs a lot of technique work to play consistently to that profile. Some might suggest an initial move inside to offensive guard, reducing the space with which he would have to work while emphasizing his strength, power, and nasty quotient, and perhaps allowing him to clean up his undisciplined play in terms of hand usage and feet-hand sync and coordination. The bottom line is that Smith is a project who needs significant work with fundamental technique in order to play effectively at the NFL level. Now, remember, he wrote that before the draft, and the Cowboys were following his plan to a T. We'll see if the injury to Tyron Smith changes things for the rookie. As for Prescott, it's another tough piece of news in an offseason that already saw him lose his top target, wide receiver Amari Cooper. Last year, Prescott threw for the 7th most yards and 4th most touchdowns while finishing as Fantasy's quarterback 12 by fantasy points per game just 1 year after suffering a gruesome ankle injury. But there was one notable difference with post-injury Prescott: his mobility. Prescott noticeably struggled to evade defenders in the open field and rushed for a career-low 146 yards and a career-low 3.0 yards per carry. A pretty dismal yards per carry mark for any quarterback, especially one who used to have the mobility that Prescott did. While that mobility may come back with time, it's likely wise to believe that nearly all of Prescott's fantasy value now comes from his ability as a passer, something we already know he excels at. But he's now a relatively immobile pocket passer in a pocket that won't be as secure. That's reason to be concerned. And the Cowboys in general should be very concerned. They are a team that undeniably got worse this offseason, and an even better version of the Cowboys from seasons ago struggled without Tyron Smith. Since 2016, Prescott's rookie season, the Cowboys have won 63% of their games with Smith. They've won just 53% of their games without him. Starting at running back today is the Jets' Breece Hall. Or is it? ESPN's Rich Cimini tweeted on Wednesday afternoon that second-year back Michael Carter had, quote, a good day of running and catching. He's still RB1. Yikes. That is going to sting for fantasy players who have been drafting the rookie haul as early as the 3rd round, while Carter has been regularly going off the board in the double-digit rounds in underdog fantasy drafts. Now, Carter certainly had a solid 2021 season as a rookie, don't get me wrong. He posted 147 carries for 639 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's 4.3 yards per carry, and 36 catches for 325 yards receiving. That's 9.0 yards per reception on 55 targets. And he finished as the running back 34 with 11.1 fantasy points per game. He played on 50% of the snaps in 14 contests and missed 3 games with an ankle injury. And he's certainly not a bad player. But it's hard to forget that the Jets traded up for Iowa State's haul in the 2nd round of the NFL draft in April. I liken this to a situation from 2 years ago when the Colts' Frank Reich stubbornly insisted on giving Jonathan Taylor the rookie treatment and using an ugly running back by committee approach when Taylor was far more effective than the other backs in the committee. Here's a tweet I posted from October 4th of 2020, which was Jonathan Taylor's rookie season and before his full-on breakout. Jonathan Taylor, 10 carries for 40 yards. Nyheim Hines plus Jordan Wilkins, 12 carries for 20 yards. Give me a break. Now, we know what happened with Jonathan Taylor down the stretch that year and certainly into 2021. Let's hope things continue that way for Breece Hall. Now, Robert Saleh is obviously rewarding a young player in Carter who didn't get discouraged when the Jets drafted Hall and instead has ostensibly worked harder. Carter should have a role. He's earned it. And it's possible it'll be too big for fantasy players' tastes early in 2022. But if you're drafting Breece Hall, you're drafting him for the long haul. No pun intended there. Much like Jonathan Taylor in his rookie season with Indianapolis. The one thing that really would irk me, though, Tevin Coleman is still in New York. If you're going to use this rotation, Robert Saleh, please make sure it doesn't include Tevin Coleman, please. I'm begging you. At our other running back spot, we return to the Bay Area for some Shanahanigans. Veteran Jeff Wilson, quote, seems like the best bet to get the first shot behind starter Elijah Mitchell in the 49ers backfield this year, according to ESPN's Nick Wagoner. This is notable because the top running back spot in a Kyle Shanahan offense typically produces for fantasy. And the starter Mitchell is currently on the sidelines with a hamstring injury after dealing with multiple injuries in his 2021 rookie campaign. Now, the veteran Jeff Wilson is a Shanahan favorite. While rookie Tyrion Davis-Price has had a strong camp, he probably hasn't done enough to unseat Wilson at this point. Meanwhile, second-year back Trey Sermon has looked awful in preseason action and is a candidate to be cut. For fantasy purposes, we still like Davis-Price for his upside, but Wilson could have more utility early in the season if Mitchell were to miss some time. Those employing a zero RB approach or those who loaded up on young running backs who might need some time to marinate before being usable for fantasy would be wise to keep tabs on this situation because Wilson might be able to crack your lineup early in the 2022 season. At our first wide receiver spot, we head to the Big Apple, where they got some good news. On the same day, they got some terrible news. The New York Giants activated veteran Sterling Shepard from the PUP list for Wednesday's practice, Dan Salamone of the Giants' official site reports. Shepard is returning from a torn Achilles. Now, Dan Duggan, who covers the Giants for The Athletic, made an interesting prediction in a tweet. Quote, with Shep officially back, time to break out the bold prediction I've been squatting on, Duggan wrote. He'll lead this team in receptions. That's some John Hanson bait if I've ever heard it. And here's the mind-boggling stat that our Scott Barrett posted. Shepard has hit 17.0 fantasy points in 5 of his last 5 healthy games with Daniel Jones active, averaging 23.1 fantasy points per game in those 5 games. And over his last 11 healthy games with Jones active, he averages 9.1 targets and 17.4 fantasy points per game. That would last year have ranked him about wide receiver 9 in targets and wide receiver 11 in fantasy points per game. Sterling Shepard loves him some Daniel Jones. Now, Shepard has been basically going undrafted in all formats, which is understandable given he's 29, hasn't played a full season since 2018, and is coming off a devastating injury. But Dan Dimes loves him, and it'll be interesting to see if he can get ramped up in time to play a significant role early in the 2022 season. Shepard's return to Wednesday practice is important because the Giants suffered a big loss during that very session. Young wideout Colin Johnson, who was pushing for playing time, went down to a torn Achilles on the same day Shepard came back from his. What a damn shame. Now, Johnson wasn't on the fantasy radar, but he was recently singled out by coach Brian Dable as someone who was playing his way into the Giants wide receiver rotation, potentially at the expense of the disappointing Kenny Galladay. Unfortunately, the Giants apparently aren't allowed to have too much good news at once. At our other wide receiver spot, we head back to Dallas, where there might actually be some good news. And I put a little asterisk on that because you'll find out why. Now, Cowboys owner Jerry Jones indicated Wednesday that the team plans to have Michael Gallup on the 53-man roster rather than the reserve PUP list to start the upcoming season as he recovers from his late 2021 torn ACL, Todd Archer of ESPN reports. Now, this could mean that Gallup will be ready before week 5. If Gallup were moved to the reserve PUP list, he would have to miss the first 4 games of the 2022 season. Now, Gallup, the Cowboys' ex-receiver, already told reporters early in training camp that he didn't anticipate being ready for week 1, but his return to the lineup could be sooner than most think. The Cowboys, suddenly thin at wide receiver after the trade of Amari Cooper and a rash of injuries, could really use some good news at the position or good news in general. But our Dr. Edwin Porras at Fantasy Points is skeptical. He said that Gallup, presuming his injury was an ACL and nothing else, is an entire month behind the Buccaneers' Chris Godwin in terms of his recovery. And for context, Godwin just started team drills in a non-contact jersey this week. So unless Gallup heals like Wolverine or the Cowboys are being irresponsible, this remains a we'll believe it when we see it kind of situation. The worst thing the Cowboys could do is rush Gallup back before he's ready, and let's hope the Tyron Smith injury doesn't cause them to do something stupid. In our flex spot, we have someone who isn't rushing back onto the field. Quite the opposite. Raiders coach Josh McDaniels indicated Wednesday that he isn't concerned about tight end Darren Waller's continued absence, Paul Gutierrez of ESPN reports. He's doing everything he can to get back out there, McDaniels noted of the tight end. I see him every day. He's in every meeting. Waller missed 2 weeks of practice with a hamstring injury, briefly returned this week, and is now out again. He should be a key contributor in McDaniels' offense, but he actually needs to get reps in the offense before contributing. Now, his ADP of tight end 4 on Underdog seems like a lot to pay for the questions we have about his health, given Waller was a huge disappointment for fantasy last year as well. Waller carried a top 3 ADP at the tight end position last season, but after a blow-up game in week 1, he scored just 1 more touchdown and finished just twice more as a top 5 weekly fantasy tight end. And by the way, he wasn't competing with Devontae Adams for targets last year either. I simply haven't found myself clicking the button on Waller's name when he comes up in my drafts, preferring to draft someone like Travis Kelce earlier or waiting a number of rounds for someone like Dallas Goedert. My name's Joe Dolan, and this has been the Fantasy Points Daily Lineup. Remember to like this video. There's that little thumbs up down there. Give it the old click. And subscribe to the Fantasy Points channel for all of the Daily Lineup episodes and all of our other videos. You will be glad you did for this 2022 NFL season. Make sure you head to fantasypoints.com for all your fantasy draft needs. Use code LINEUP22 for an extra 10% off any package. And by the way, the aforementioned rookie prospect guide, including all of Greg Cosell's rookie evaluations and Wes Huber's Devy profiles, that's already discounted a further 60%. So you can get 10% off the 60%. It's an incredible deal. Add it on to any subscription. You'll be glad you did. I'm Joe. You're you. And I'll see you tomorrow, folks.